So, hello and welcome. It's time for the year's first coaching session, and I thought that we can start off with some normal speed 9 maxes. And today I think that we are playing at the $7 and $15 level, so at the end of the low stakes. And good evening to Neo, good evening to Semicolon. And Semicolon seems to be a new one. Welcome! And these 9 max sit and goes, these are the bread and butter of all of the sit and goes. So these are the basic sit and goes, and these are the tournaments that you are seeing most material to. And I think the normal speed sit and goes, they are a really good place to start playing sit and goes, because you can get a lot of play for your money. Like in these $7 turbo sit and goes, the blind levels are 10-minute blind levels as opposed to 5-minute blind levels in turbo sit and goes. And I think you are also having a bit more time to think, and the time bank is longer as well in these games. These are not taking twice as long as turbos, even though blinds are twice as long, but the average stack size is going to be deeper most of the time. At the early levels, I'm pretty much opening any pocket pair. That's because we are getting pretty good set mining odds as well when we are opening at the first 2 blind levels. I've forgotten to put my poker tracker on. And I don't know that if some of you, even in our English community, were following the Caleon's Supernova Elite run, but this PGA fan that's now on $7 and $15 games. I don't know, can I find the player? Yeah, he's playing right now only $7 and $15 games. But I think that when Caleon was doing his Supernova Elite, I think we saw the guy in $60 and $30 games, so that's something that I really don't advocate, that you are trying to get Supernova Elite or Supernova and you are leaving it to the last day and need to. And in here, we are getting such good odds. Like, we are almost 1/5 odds, even though our hand isn't good. But we are going to realize more than 20% equity, even without position. And I let him have the initiative here and betting himself, because I think that when the board looks like that, I'm getting more out of this guy if I'm letting him bet instead of betting myself. In here with 9-jack, it's 9-jack suited. It's going to be a hand that we are knowing when we are hitting it really well, and it's usually going to be an easy hand to play. And when we are getting it for 20 chips, that's 1/75 of our stack, and we can hit some really good straight draws, some really good flush draws. And in here, there have been two distinct players that have bet, so it's going to be a fold for me. Even though we are having the second pair and the second king hitting on the turn, it will make the opponents having a king slightly more unlikely. But when the other guy that only called the bet on the flop starts betting on the turn, I think then it's going to be highly likely that this guy is having a king, even though this time it seems that probably neither one of those guys had pretty much anything. And today I'm just going to do one run of these games. Deya has been sick since the start of the year, so like she can't talk pretty much at all, so, and I'm afraid that I'm going to get the same bug, so if my voice gives up today, then we are doing some other session in some other day. And I think that we should do some other sessions on another day, because I know that Neo has asked for the Neo has asked for 235 VPP hyper turbo satellites, but those are basically a really hard game to do on Sundays, because on Sundays the Sunday storm is starting, and when the Sunday storm is starting, then either they quit offering those $235 FPP satellites, or then when you win one, you are registered to the Sunday storm, and Sunday storm can take for ages. So I'll need to have some other day or some earlier timing to do the 245s. In here, the Pocket 10s, I think they are solid open, because it's not a bad thing if we are getting the pot right here, right now, and like 60% of the time it's going to be a hard hand to play, and if we are even stealing a button for ourselves, it will help us immensely. Like if this guy just folds, it's going to help us a lot. And I don't believe that this guy is having the queen. And now the 7 is like, it's probably one of the nastier cards. And when he starts betting bigger, I'm thinking that about 60% of his range right now has been flush draws, and I think the completed flush draw is like a really high percent of his range by betting really small on the flop and betting really big on the turn. So, and I don't think that that's a good idea for you to play like that, that when you are hitting your draw, then you are betting big, and when you are not hitting your draw, you are betting small, because it makes you pretty easy to read. And because we had another limper, I'm thinking that we are getting best equity for our pocket 5s if we are just calling, because then if someone is trying to isolate the limpers, they're usually betting smaller than if we are raising here. We are almost always going to face, if we are facing a 3-bet, we are facing a 3-bet that's going to be, if this would have been suited, this 9-8 off, I would have been going for it. Ah! That's horrible. That's really, really, really horrible. Don't ever fold pocket kings. I was doing something somewhere else, then my mouse jumped to the table and I accidentally folded pocket kings after one limp. If the limper now has aces, we are going to look like geniuses, even though it was completely unintended and something that you should never be doing. And Neo is now trying to make me feel a bit better that he has been folding kings as well. I don't know, should we like have some kind of a pocket kings folder society or a support group for guys that are folding pocket kings? But they are always having aces. It's sometimes annoying that you are just moving your mouse to the right direction when the mouse is jumped to the table and then boom. Oh well, those things happen. Now it's only, even when you are making a mistake, then it's not the most important thing that you are seeing the mistake. The most important thing should be from that point onwards on getting back to your A game. And usually I'm saying that when you are making a mistake on the table, start breathing deep. And now PGA fan is betting on in position. I think that PGA fan is, or at least he should be, betting in position with quite a wide range. So, and I don't think that if he's betting with a wide range that has not connected to the board, I think that he's not going to two barrel often enough for it to be pretty profitable for me, even pretty profitable for me not to fold against the first bet, especially when the sizing is small. It's going to be an interesting hand on the top left right now with the pocket tens. And PGA fan, for some reason I'm thinking about him as a slightly needy reg, even though my stats would show pretty much otherwise. But that is my gut feeling on him. And I think that when even this guy, even when he looks like he's going to be really wide on 8 hands, it's not enough for a sample size, and I think the UTG player's range is going to pretty much crush our range, and then there is the other guy with the 3 bets. So I think something like pocket jacks would be hard, and pocket queens would be a shove pretty much every time. In top right, I started isolating this guy that looks to be a bit fishy on the button, and then we are having lots of opportunities to playing some position plays. And this is a nasty spot in a way, because I don't think that if we are having an opponent that looks mostly at his own cards, that we are going to get him to fold on the turn as it opens the second flush draw. But I think on the river, when almost all the draws are busted, I think we are getting better fold equity on the river than on the turn. Oh, the guy had us beat pretty well from the flop onwards. And I think he lost some value in general, not against that exact hand. Like, when I'm having ace-8 there, I'm not going to call a lot, but I might be bluffing. So against that exact hand, he played pretty well with the top pair, top kicker, and practically also on that exact run out. But I think when you would think about my whole range in that situation, on my range there would have been hands that the opponent could have gotten more value out by betting himself. And usually I think that in set mining, if we are having against a racer and we are having 20 times more depth in our stacks, we can go for a set mine. And if we are the first ones to go, or we are behind a limper, then I'm thinking that about 30 times is going to be decent enough stack depth that we are on average we are getting enough money in. Like, even when we are hitting a set like 1 out of 8.5 half times, I'm thinking that we are requiring more than that as effective stacks, because if we would just go for set mining on every time that we are getting better than 1 in 8 and 5, then we are going to do a lot of mistakes because we are not going to get the whole stack in. in most of the time. So most of the time we are just getting, if the opponent is not hitting anything, we are getting very little, or very small amount of our stacks in the middle, and we need to plan for it. And also there is another point that even when we are hitting sets are not immortal nuts. Like, even when we are hitting a set, there might be an opponent hitting a straight or a flush during the hand, so even we are or better sets, so we still might be losing some of those hands. And if there are raisers and callers, then I'm just less stiff with the about 20 times. So the about 20 times, it's a guideline. The more limpers there are before you, the closer you are to closing the action. If you are on the button, it's great because then you can do also some position plays. So it's not like I'm always going to just go for 20 or more, but it's going to be a rule of thumb that you can use when you are evaluating if it's going to be profitable to set mine in a given situation. And if an UTG raises and you are UTG +1, I think the rule is quite strict in a way that it keeps us out of really bad situations for set mining. And if UTG raises and we are calling, I don't think that we are getting 3-bet that often from the rest of the table. So I think set mining in those situations would still be profitable if we are having the 20. If we are having at least 20 times the effective stacks, and if it would be like the UTG is having 700 chips, we are having 1,200 chips, and the UTG opens for 60 chips, we are not going for it because it would be only 12 times as much in effective stacks against the opponent that is going to be in the game. And as we can see in these games, one of the best parts in playing normal speed games is that there are not a lot of regs, and even some regs are going to be pretty needy, so they would be pretty easy to play against. And there are a lot of players that are more comfortable, or a lot more recreational players that are more comfortable playing regular speed games. So I think in general these games are a lot softer than turbos. Like, if you can get a certain ROI in turbos, I think you can do 2 or 2.5 times more in a regular speed game. So you are also, I think, like in general, if you are a winning poker player, you can like play twice as high stakes of a regular speed sit and go as you can play in a turbo. And it's not going to be the same from turbo to hyper, because between turbos and hypers the effective rake changes a lot, and because of the rake changes, I think the hypers are closer to turbos. And Neo said, despite the higher rake, if we are comparing the rake in these games, I think it's somewhere around $1.3 rake in $15 normal speed. And actually we can check the rake. In here we are liking to draw for cheap if we are having the opportunity to. It would be an easy call if this Gabrant is. And in general, in this kind of situation, I think that we are having quite a solid hand going for a 3-way pot. We are having about, I think, 40% is equity. And it's going to be enough, because I think that this guy is going to fold, and when we are having a nut flush draw, we are having a lot more equity than we would think. And in here we have been just checking, so I think it's quite unlikely that our opponent is having an ace here. And unfortunately, we do not hit, and as I said, it's really unlikely that our opponent is having an ace there. So, yay us. And when I'm opening the turn-A lobby, it's about 1.11, so I don't think the rake difference, or I think the rake difference is, it's like it's within 1%, so it's not going to be... I think that the regular speed rake is not going to be as high as it would prohibit playing these games more than the turbos. Like, if you are comparing the turbo and hyper rake, the hyper rake is about half of this rake. Like the 9max hypers, they are raked at 0.61 $1, so it's going to be 50 cents less or 3.5% less, and that's going to have a real impact. But it's going to be, in general, I think that the stack sizes are going to be higher, and also you are getting way more hands in a normal speed sit and go on average. So a winning poker player has a lot more opportunities to apply the edge in the game. And of course, what's then the bad part in... And if this guy would have been something like this rip pillow that's 26/5, I would probably have raised. I'm quite close in that hand as well, but because we are having position. But if an opponent has only opened one or played one hand in 20 thus far, I'm thinking that the opponent is likely being so needy that it's not going to be a good thing for our ace-8 off. So I think that our hand against his or her range would be pretty badly dominated. And in here, this is what we like to see when we are... And I think right now we want to see that this opponent is betting. And even if the flush draw comes through, this guy limps from the UTG and limp re-raises. It's horrible for an ace-jack. Like, even this when we are having the ace of diamonds, it's not going to be horrible for us because we are still having outs, and there are opportunities that our opponent is not having the flush but is having a queen and it wants to get the money in at that point. That's dirty. Yeah. And usually if I'm having time to chat on the people or with the people, but I'm never talking any strategy on the table. And Neo said, I thought about maybe adding normal speeds when I switch to continued play, more time to make decisions. Are there some adjustments turbo players have to make? I think that if you are playing these just as you would play turbos at the equivalent stack depth and you are adjusting to your opponents when you see your opponents in game, I think you are pretty golden. There will be a lot more players like this Rippilo and Supreme and Azam in these games, so it might make a lot of sense to play with a a bit more passive or a bit more tight and aggressive strategy than you are playing in turbos. Like in turbos, when you are seeing a lot of opponents that are playing or are tight and aggressive playing regs, then it makes then it will be a good adjustment against those tight and aggressive regs to open up your range and become more loose. But in these games, I think that it's against these guys, the tight and aggressive, like there will be opponents on the table where tight and aggressive will help them get rid of their money really quickly. And even in this game, we can also see that we are having a really good table on the top left to adjust on the other direction as well, that we can adjust to stealing a lot from these guys that are behind us and playing more solid against playing more tight and solid against these guys. And ace-10 off is going to be at the bottom of my opening range on the early positions in these games. And actually one more point to Neo when you asked for what adjustments you need to make. I think there is one important adjustment that if you are switching to continuous play that you should make from if you are adding normal speeds and turbos to your sessions. I think that the most important adjustment would be that you are registering for turbos for about 20 minutes after you stopped registering for the normal speed games. Like, if you are registering for 20 to 25 minutes after, then your turbos and normal speeds should end at the same time and your average amount of tables would be in check. In here, I think that we are going to steal the pot cheaper later on in the game. And even when we are having open-ender, we are having the idiot side of it. So if this would be like 6, 7, 8 and we would have deuce 9, I would be more inclined to just go for it. But when we are having the idiot end of the straight and the opponent is betting for a full pot, and also queen, jack, 10, when opponent is limping, they are hitting queen, jacks and 10s really often with their range. Like, there are not a lot of ace high hands on the range, but there are a lot of queen high, jack high and 10 high cards that I think that the general opponent will limp in those situations. And that's one point that you'll always need to think about, and what you should also do when you are out of the tables. You should look like a player that has a general stats. Like, I think at first you are getting stats from players like PGA Fan, and you should go through them and see, like, add a filter to your Hold'em Manager Poker Tracker 4, add a filter and look through the hands. Look through the hands, like what kind of hands they are playing when they are playing in a certain way, and make notes of those. And also, when you are having some opponents that are likely, actually we could have set mind in here. I had just quick decisions to make outside the screen. And also, if you are looking at what do the general opponents do that are a bit more fishy, then you are just doing like, you are not getting a lot of hands on players that are, because in here we can also see that our opponents that are more fishy, they are more likely to not play more than one table, so you are not going to get a lot of hands on those. But I think that we would be going to get good sample sizes if we are doing an alias on Hold'em Manager or Poker Tracker and do something like 20 of these guys that are playing stats like this Supreme 66 or Rip Pillow, that just combine the stats of 20 players that you have seen with the similar kinds of stats and go through it, that what does a general player that looks like that normally play. I actually should have bet the flop, I think. It's close. And it's also, I probably should have called the turn as well, as he didn't bet the flop. And on the turn, when he has only checked the flop, I don't think that, or checked pre-flop and checked the flop, it's going to be really unlikely that our opponent would have either an ace or a king. So that's actually a pretty big misplay on my part and I think that actually checking the flop is fine, but when we are checking the flop and the ace comes on the turn, we just have to, I think we just have to call the turn and also call quite a few rivers, even though our hand is only it's going to be probably second to bottom pair, but if our opponent is not having or his range is going to have so few of those hands that are either hitting 2 pair or hitting higher pair, and so that would make his range consist mostly of bluffs in that situation, and that our hand is an excellent example of a bluff catcher. Youchi! I think defending here with those stack sizes is going to be more profitable than just giving up. With pocket sevens, that's a horrible situation to have this guy instantly 3-bet small and then there is also a caller. I think something like pocket tens would be an easy, just go for it with these stack sizes. But pocket sevens is going to be too weak in my opinion. And in those situations, even though we are defending quite wide against the opener that opens from the button and has position throughout the hand, I still think that we are not required to do crazy stuff like check raising to make it more profitable. And especially when antes come into play, if we are having these kind of stack depths, I think that we are having enough equity that we can raise by playing a bit more straightforward strategy. And actually I think that when the opponent checks the 2 kings flop and we are having a complete bluff in our hands with the 7-5 suited, we would have to bet the turn about always as a bluff against this Aladdin. So that was another misplay by my part, but I hope that you are learning more by listening about my reasoning than seeing what I'm doing on the table, since today I seem to be pressing the wrong buttons a lot, starting from the folding the pocket kings at the start. It's actually my first session of poker for the year, so that might have something to do with it as well. A lot of other stuff to do at the beginning of New Year. And of course in these games that you are going to, like, at the early stages I think the opponents are going to play a bit better than in the later stages. Because something like push fold is going to happen so late in the game, and I think like mostly the recreational players are out when the push fold stage starts, so I think that even the regs and the recreationals are having way weaker push fold game. This not a lot of hands on this guy. Why we are actually in this situation? That's like a really good question, but then we are hitting the one card idiot straight. And now we are having showdown equity, but our hand is still not worth a lot because our opponent can have 10 with every combo, 10 jack, 10 9, 10 8. Then there are like million different jack hands. I think we need to check call still. This is a nasty spot on the bottom right. With a small pocket pair, usually it would be good to 3-bet or 3-bet shoving that, or actually 3-bet shoving would be probably the best option if the opponent is aggressive at all. But if the opponent is passive and is playing mainly hands that we are flipping and he's not going to fold those hands as he's finally gotten some good hands, or 10 pocket pairs that are completely dominating us, it's not going to be a good spot to re-steal on a nit there, but against the general opponent that plays aggressively, it's going to be a great spot. Without antes, I think this is really close. And there are like, I think all of the options are really close in equity. And Neo said that, well, they can't be worse than the turbo guys. I'd say you'll have to check it, because I'm betting that these guys are worse in shove fold than the turbo guys. And I know that's saying a lot. And as Deja said, that there are more recreational players than regs when comparing normal speed to turbos. That's exactly the point. So like these games are, the average player in these games are worse than in an average player in turbos. And also you are getting more hands. You are getting more hands with deeper effective stack sizes. So those are all factors that are giving a good player more edge in these games. So that's why I think that you are going to get so much higher edge in these games compared to the turbos. This is a nice situation because we are having a perfect hand to shove there. And Neo asks for a question it's going to be a horrible question to answer because it's so open-ended. When I'm opening at 10 to 15 big blinds, I'm mostly going to be calling. So my range is going to be a lot more calls than folds. In that exact situation, when there is a opponent that's going to be shoving with a bit of a bigger stack than... Actually, when he's shoving with a bit of a bigger stack than usual, we are almost guaranteed to be flipping against the pocket pairs, so... So actually, with the ace... If it was ace-queen, I shouldn't have folded the hand, so... That was a hand that was misplayed. But basically, if I'm raise folding from UTG, it's going to be either that there is going to be a really needy player shoving and I'm at the bottom of my range, or then it's going to be that there are a lot of smaller stacks and there is like one bigger stack that I need to fold against. With ace-5 suited, I think that it's going to be profitable as a shove, but it's not going to be profitable as a raise call, and raise folding it would be... I think it would waste the value of the hand somewhat, but we are having two needier looking players behind us, so raise folding still might be good against these guys, because I don't think that they are... I don't think that they are shoving that often against us. But like Neo, it's like also one part in those situations will be, do I think that my opponent in the hand understands position? Because if my opponent understands position, then it's going to be that he's going to play with a tighter range against me. And if the player seems to understand position, then I'm going to call with a tighter range than against a player that would be like completely random. Because I think the random players are going to attack even UTG with a range that wouldn't normally make sense. Because they are having more static ranges against every position. Oh. That's a bit like, come on. There is practically no hand that I'm shoving that will be behind that, and there will be plenty of my shove range that are going to dominate that hand. So even though in that hand we now lost 1,300 chips, it doesn't matter, because the opponent, when he... I think he limp called there or raise called there. When he raise calls or limp calls there with something like ace queen, king queen off, they are playing like pretty perfectly against our general range in that situation. And in general, I'm going to be min-raising from the UGG a lot when we are having enough stack depth to abuse players that are not defending their blinds as often as they should be. As I think that's going to be like one of the most common mistakes that regs are making in these games. So I want to capitalize on the mistakes that the other players are making. And Neo said that hopefully I can see that in the stats of these guys, like higher 3-bet. It's also like if there is an opponent, let's say this Rippidel that had a like 6.3%. Like 6.3% 3-bet, and this VL Nevsky is having also 6.3% 3-bet. I'm thinking that if I have open from the UTG this VL Nevsky guy compared to the guy that was 28/8, I think, or 28/4. I think that the guy that's playing a lot more with the recreational players that's there will effectively against UTG have a higher 3-bet percentage, even if their 3-bet percentage stats are the same. Because I think that the tighter, more reggy by stats looking players are going to... The tighter, more reggy looking players are going to take position into account. That they are also going to think that hey, when you are opening from UTG, you are not opening the same range that you are opening from the button or small blind. With less than 3 big blinds, we just need to go for it with any ace. And in here, this Muro guy limped, and we had pocket eights, and we raised him, and I think he might be slightly tilted on the hand before, so I'm still trading a bit more carefully in this situation. And he had a flush on the turn. Oh well. If he limp goes like that close to the bubble, he's going to get into trouble. And this ace-queen suit, it's like if we are having an opponent that's going to be a pain in the ass to get rid of in the pots, I think that the higher equity play there is to shove, because colliding with a player in this game is going to be... I think that we are going to get the guy to fold more often pre-flop than on the flop and onwards. And the ace-queen suited is going to have such a high equity against the general range of this Vokasman. In here, on the top right, we are doing a stop and go, which means that we are first stopping the action by calling, and then we are having pretty much the perfect stack size, about 1/2 of the pot to a pot, that we are getting more, like our stack size is not enough. When the opponent is limping, that it's not enough to get folds from the guys pre-flop. But we are having a hand that flops decently, and we are having a hand that not only flops decently, but also our stack size is really good, that we are having a really nice risk to reward ratio if we are shoving pretty much any flop. And of course we can exploit the opponent's general tendencies in mostly shoving those flops that we have not hit, because opponents are going to... And in these situations the PGA fan is a small stack, and it's not going to be as nice to collide for a full stack against this lucky, even if we think that we are most of the time ahead because of ICM, so we are trying to keep the pot small. And unfortunately, when we tried to keep the pot small, we made the guy the opportunity to hit his flush. But the flush draws are going to be such a small part of the opponent's range in there, so it's like, good game. Pocket fours, I think that that's going to be... That's actually going to be a Nash shove, and it's going to be pretty close. And in here I'm hating my life. As a middle stack on the bubble of a 9-max tournament, even though we are having a solid hand, like if we are shoving, we are winning chips no matter what. But we can't get this Vorasman and Lucky to fold, and if we are not getting those guys to fold, we are risking a huge amount of equity, as there is still a shorter stack in the table. 10-9 off. I think in this situation, the 10-9 off, it's going to have so little equity if it's a shove compared to a min-raise fold, that I think that min-raise fold is playing better as a shove, but it's a bit close. Something like 9-10 suited is probably, or Jack-10 suited is going to be something that plays better as a shove compared to a min-raise fold, because it's going to have so much equity, and min-raise folding that equity is going to be bad. But I think in that situation it's going to be slightly better. Slightly better to min-raise, especially as the dollar unit hasn't showed that he's going to be defending his blinds aggressively. And Neo said that I would have smashed my gamepad at that flush. Have to work on a mental game. Or then you are just purchasing a really expensive gamepad that you are feeling the pain if you are smashing it. So this guy is limping so wide of a range that I think that King Jack off is going to be good enough to be a shove here. Ouch! He's limping a wide range, but there will also be traps. But if he's limping like 30% of hands, 26% of hands, out of those hands, there are going to be quite a few hands that are as strong as that Ace-King. And when we are having quite a nice distribution of the players in those tables, we can enlarge the screen somewhat. King 3 off with 6 big blinds, and as we are through the bubble already, I think it's going to be a good. But if it would be still the bubble situation, I think that would have been a bad push. And that was our first in the money finish for today. We have had 6 or 7 games, and that's not nice, I'd have to say. And I'm a bit on the edge with this hand. Without antes, it's not probably going to be a good shove. And min raise, it would have been nice, but this Dan Guinho seems to be 3-betting quite aggressively, so we don't have a lot of hands on him, but I think that in general we are going to get a lot of 3-bets on from him. And Neo said that you had 8x, I think 8-6 off there on the small blind on top left and folded. Did I see that correctly? Yeah, you might have seen that one correctly. And if I'm thinking it through in my head, it's actually going to... The 8-6 off is likely going to be a shove, even when it's going to be 3-handed. So it's going to be a shove. I think it's close, but when I'm having only 6 big blinds, it's going to be a shove, and the player is recreational player, so I'm thinking that he's probably going to fold against the small blind shove a bit too often. So that was a clear mistake. And that's also something to remind you. Nobody is perfect in playing these games, and it's only about... And I think that when I have been teaching for other players, and it's like probably one thing stands out on the players, how successful they will be. And I have found out that the players that are not making mistakes on the tables, those are the guys that are having the hardest time starting or learning to win at poker. That there are some players that are going to be smart, but if you are so smart that you are not doing mistakes on the table, it's going to be really hard to improve your game. And Neo, I think you are correct that when you are shorter and an opponent should call wider, the chances of him making a calling error by being too tight would be higher, as opposed to higher stack sizes when it would be closer to his, like, I'd say, natural calling range. So the closer that we are from the natural comfort level for calling for a player, the more likely is that he's not going to make a mistake there. But especially on the short stack play, I think that there are plenty of opportunities when players have not looked through the situations closely enough so that they are usually calling too little on those situations. And when they are making the errors, I think 8-6 off is going to be even... I think it's going to be a Nash push from the small blind. The ICM is so small in there. And I think like that's a really good explanation on Neo on how the, like, what players should be playing and what the players are playing in real life. That's going to be really close in. So that's going to be a really good thing to think about. So I'd say that's going to get some cookie points for Neo for a good answer. We are flipping and then we are losing the flip. And then we are going to do some other interesting ideas that now we are trying to hide our stack size a bit. That if we are having just 4 big blinds, it's going to be a bit better for us to min raise, and then we are also having an opportunity to shove the flop. Like now we are also, if the opponents are only looking at their own cards and if they are multi-tabling a lot, then min raising will make them miss your stack size that you are so short in the situation. And when they are missing the stack size, you are getting a lot easier chips. And even against recreational players, we are in those situations, we are converting them to better situations when they might first fold against a small raise, and also they might fold on the flop bet when we are having, when our stack size is going to be that we are still making a sizable flop bet. But I'd say that unfortunately our session today will be over, and as you saw that, like, if we are doing a turbo session, we can do like 2 sessions playing all the games through, and it takes about 45 minutes. In these sessions I started the first game at 4 minutes over 9, and now we finished the last game, so they are a bit over 1 hour to go if you are playing multiple normal speed sit and goes, so they will take about 20 minutes longer than the turbo sit and goes. And also, if you are trying to improve your amount of games per hour, it's going to be really good if you are playing the normal speed turbos and if you also can play hypers, because you can like stop registering for normal speeds and turbos and you can still register for something like 45 minutes of hypers at the end, and all of your games should be ending about at the same time. So that's going to be one other top tip for your next year's grind. And now it's time to time to end. We didn't mark any hands for this session, so we are not having the analysis part. It was a conscious decision on my mind to not mark any hands, even though there would have been some hands that would have been good to discuss, and I did talk more on the hands during the stream because I didn't know that if my voice is going to last for a longer session. So, and I'm feeling some in my throat right now, so I'm not going to go back on those hands. But I think next Sunday we are going to hold a longer session. And so it's it today. Thanks for everyone chatting in this. It always makes it a bit easier when the chat is active and we are getting comments here. Even if it's about my misplays that were pretty... And there were a lot of misplays for today, and that was a bit sad. So I hope that next week we are playing better and feeling better. And I'll hope to see as many of you for the next time as well. If you are going asleep, have a good night. If you are still playing poker, may this be a winning night for you. Bye!